All right, everybody, it's our Klaus here, and very excited to be presenting this information today. And as always, I encourage those of you new to the channel to watch this video in conjunction with previous ones, as I will constantly be referencing information that I have discussed in the past, and it can seem overwhelming if this is your first video. But so again, this is all very deeply interwoven, and this channel aims to trace out those connections and show you how all of these seemingly obscure pieces are actually a part of this incredibly detailed blueprint, showing us how they will be unveiling their new world. But so with that being said, let's get right into this video today. I want to talk about this ultimate elephant in the room, and that is Trump and this just impossible issue of the border wall. So, as a result of this just embarrassing spectacle of conversation, over the past several years now, we've seen an incredibly deep schism just driven right through the nation. Parties, everything, people even further pushed. We saw the longest government shutdown. Now we have a declared state of national emergency over this fucking thing. So it's worth talking about. And really pulling apart. So, in doing so, let's start here with what is not a gimmick. It's a shtick. This is real. This is where you can buy bricks to send to Democratic members to show them that we need a wall. All bullshit aside with this, let's look at the numbers that we have here. We have the flagship number of 88 connected to Trump, Pangolin, Get Out, false flags, all of it, and the number 22, the master builder number. So, of course, in thinking about this wall and conceptually what is going on here, it's very important that we think about this master builder and this Masonic way of building a world and the symbolism of that. So in breaking down that symbolism, and hold on to that 22, it'll come back. Let's go to when Trump unveils his new slogan, "Finish the Wall." Completely unjustified slogan, but he puts it out there in El Paso, Texas on February 11th. 2 times 11 is 22. Hold on to that. Let's look at some things here, because this really caught my eye when this came out. So this is 2 days after my video talking about David Blaine, Donald Trump, their connections to the stock market, the buried alive bit, and all of the information about Dumbo, and again connecting it to Trump. But so where I'm going with all of that, so take a look over here. This is for El Paso, Texas. Notice the nickname there is the Sun City. And keep in mind this church over here too. That's going to be a thing later on. But when we go to the right side of your screen here, you can see that the last thing I was talking about was the Six of Hearts. And this is a card that on the day that Blaine premiered his Beyond Magic special, again where he performed the bullet catch, he does this live performance where he incorrectly guesses a card. He guesses the Six of Hearts. And when you look at that coding on the right side of your screen, not only do you see these connections to major concepts, but the Sun City. And then 2 days later, Trump unveils this new slogan in the Sun City on 2/11. And just a couple of weeks ago, I put out this incredible video discussing the final episode of The Office to feature Michael Scott, the 148th episode, titled Goodbye, Michael. Of course, that number 148, sharing coding with Donald J. Trump. I also discussed in that video Scott's mirror saying he would take a bullet to the head. But again, you see at the airport this 211 number. And I have been emphatically reiterating the importance of airports in this predictive programming connected to Trump. And in the connections to Dumbo. Again, elephant is an anagram for the plane. And on the right side of your screen, you can see all of these connections that we went into on the previous video. Not only that 88, where you can see everything written out there, but again, thinking with Get Out, the TSA agent warning of a second 9/11 being on some geriatric shit. Again, I've talked about that exhaustively. And notice as well, just that to reiterate here, that the remake is coming out on the 88th day of the year. Again, everything we discussed with that. But on and on. But let's take a look at the left side of your screen now. And notice that phrase, finish the wall. A 13-letter phrase, of course, 13 connected to the death card, the transformation card, which we've been talking about exhaustively. Again, on the right side of your screen, you can see how more of that Dumbo coding connects in with it. But look at the initial abbreviations giving you that 625, and I'm going to ask you to hold on to that number to the very end of this video. And when we look at the simple value for finish the wall, it is the number 146. That's a very interesting number to me, because June 14th is Trump's birthday, and that can be written out as 14-6 or 146. But take a look at this coding here again. I have reiterated immensely. Geriatric shit, global control, financial crisis, The Economist, my name, book 77. Of course, the reference to Da Vinci and The Economist standing out because of this 33rd edition here that we've been talking about immensely. And again, Trump on here, not only with the elephant and the arrow pointing directly at him, and how we discussed that as a shot at him, but also that grid over Trump's face certainly reminds me of him being behind a wall. And all the things, okay? So, in thinking about all of that and connecting this over, one of the things that I do want to reiterate is that on that cover, those glaring letter or numbers of 2019, and when you drop the 0 out of there, you're left with the numbers 219. And as I discussed in a video, not only is 219 the letter abbreviations for border security, but it's the same values as Let's Make America Great Again, as well as stock market collapse, Trump Tower, and Donald Trump the Wall. And so why I want to reiterate that to you is because we're going to be connecting Donald Trump to Pink Floyd's The Wall. And when I first saw that phrase, finish the wall, I thought, you got to finish the damn wall. That's what this is. So let's look on the left side of the screen here. Now, Trump just so happened to be 33 years old when that album was first released on November 30th of 1979. So, of course, that date reducing down to 33, and you can see I have written out for you a tremendous amount of connections to that date. But worth noting is that in 1979, Trump Tower began construction. So at that age of 33, again, how interesting. And then, of course, on that same date, 4 years later, you have the inauguration of Trump Tower. And as we've discussed, the number 4 of incredible importance. I'll pull up this on the right side of your screen. You can see its connections not only to, in essence, everything of the earth, 4 winds, moon phases, seasons, elements, but you can also see its connections to occult ideas and so much more. So of course that's very important. Now you can see as well how that November 30th day, of course, connects to that World in 2019 covers. That's when the pre-sale was made available, and I discussed in that moon worship video. But take a look through, if you read through this information, you can see arriving at 3/26/2019 is the 127th year anniversary of Walt Whitman's death, and how I got there is very interesting. But why that was standing out to me in the context of this was seeing that Trump Tower, the address is written out as 721. Of course, the nice mirror of that. And so, of course, there you can see all of the other bits to reiterate that information. So, very fascinating. Now, let's look at some other things here. The movie was released on May 23rd, and again, incredibly important date, but you can see there the reduction to 55, and the year was 1982. But May 23rd, a big day, because the 143rd day with 222 days remaining. And damn it if we haven't been talking about that number so much as well lately. Again, you can see on the right side of your screen its connections to the World Economic Forum, as well as the information I presented about the barcode that the stork has on that Economist cover. And again, how the first and last 3 digits give us area codes for the second and 22nd states. Again, that 222. Again, just all the things lining up with the 35s that you see as well. It's all there. But what's really interesting here to consider as well, and of course, just remember, Blaine speaking at the World Economic Forum this year on the 33rd day of the government shutdown. It's just unreal. But when the movie was released, Trump was 35 years old, 11 months and 9 days. So if we add all of those numbers together, 35, 11, and 9, we do get 55. And of course, it's just an incredibly important number for you to have in your mind and looking at this research. Again, its connections with the number 7, one of the perfect numbers, as well as the number 10. All the things we've discussed. But so, it's very peculiar to me as well that when you mirror this, his age when this movie was released, it's 9/11/53. And again, when we add all of the numbers from that stork, we do get the number 53. And again, I discussed that at length in that video, and of course its connections with just everything. But so in thinking about that year that the movie came out, because that's what's really interesting me, right? Is 1982 had some other interesting stuff. And so in thinking about this 9/11 connection especially, look at this. This is an interview from February 23rd of 1982. And again, if you write this as we would here, that would be an inverted 322 skull and bones number. But in this interview with Trump, for no apparent reason, there is a reference to the September 11 attacks. And I just found that to be so incredibly peculiar and felt that it was worth mentioning to all of you. But let's look at something else from 1982. So this is an article from the Washington Post, and turns out that in 1982 they began doing their Forbes 400 list. Again, drop those zeros, there's your 4 again. And so in this article, this man talks about his experiences with Trump from the beginning of this project and how he lied to him. So take a look at how this begins. In May 1984, an official from the Trump organization called to tell me how rich Donald J. Trump was. The official was John Barron, a name we now know as an alter ego of Trump himself. Now that one had gotten by me. I did not know that was a nickname of his. But so check this out. In our first ever list in 1982, we included him at 100 million, but Trump was actually worth roughly 5 million. So that's a $95 million difference. Now, interestingly, Pink Floyd's The Wall is 95 minutes. But we'll get back to The Wall in a second. I want to run you through this article because it's so interesting. It says his confident deceptions were so big that they had an unexpected effect on the Forbes staff. Instead of believing that they were outright fabrications, we believed them simply as vain embellishments on the truth. This was a model Trump would use for the rest of his career, telling a lie so cosmic that people believed that some kernel of it had to be real. And this eventually paved a path towards the presidency. So I love how he is just tying in this con man notion here. Again, that's what is going on with all of this wall talk. So again, you can see Trump's lawyer getting involved with all of this and saying that he would just have to trust him on Trump's worth and that he was looking at these bank statements, on and on. But why I keep going through here is you can see here, he's talking again about these calls from John Barron. Talking about taking control of the company from his dad, who, when interviewed, discusses how he feels Trump is so much better than him. It's so weird. But so here you can see in 1990 court case, Trump testified that he had used false names in phone calls to reporters under this John Barron name. So established name and hold on to that name. But so getting back to 1982, he informed me that he had bought the Barbizon Plaza Hotel in the adjoining 100 Central Park South for just $13 million. While I was in Trump's office, a broker supposedly called to offer him $100 million for the property. Trump refused the offer while looking me in the eye. I believed then that he used a staffer to stage the call, and I resisted the fictitious valuation. Later going on to find a report describing Trump's purchase of the property for $65 million. So again, these egregious lies, and of course this 13, a reference to that death card. But so it just goes on and on here. And again, there then is a Forbes article inside the epic fantasy that's driven Donald Trump for 33 years. On and on. And then of course they just talk about how he, more than anybody else, was so concerned about his ranking on this list. And you can see in 2016, Trump's presidential campaign put out a statement saying that he had a net worth in excess of $10 billion. And of course, all the emphasis we've put on the number 10. Again, that stork is carrying a 10-digit barcode in the Phoenix from the '88 cover with the 10 medallion. But keep going. Also in 1982, and keeping us in line with this idea of airplane connections, Pan Am Flight 759 crashes, killing all 146 on board. Okay, bringing us right back to the top. And then so, this is also the year of Brett Kavanaugh's alleged diary that was under so much scrutiny recently. And again, that's just this way of them keeping it in the public conversation. But so anyways, now back to the movie. 95-minute movie. It's 1 hour and 35 minutes. Again, you can see how we get a 666 there. But notice that Pink Floyd, The Wall, gives us the same coding as Donald Trump, Dumbo, and 2019. You also see POTUS, DJ Trump, America's Destroyed, and Prophecy Fulfilled. But so in thinking about that, let's take a look at a scene from The Wall here in which this giant phoenix-like bird that came from a dove is flying over the land as a wall is being erected. And as that wall is being erected, it then flashes to the inside here. And what caught my eye immediately were these two speakers that very clearly resemble 8s, making a nice 88. And of course, television's above both of those, and Trump, our celebrity president. But then so notice as well this red classic car. And if we look at the coding for red classic car, it's the same as John Barron, Trump's fictitious name, and Freemasons, and Law and Order, and written out number 185. Which of course is the same as Donald John Trump. Zion's Coming King, all of the, again, this is one of the hallmark numbers that we've been looking into and that I've described in the past. Judgment and the Star, the two cards tilted on the Economist Tarot spread cover. And then Emerald City comes up here as well, which interestingly that nickname was official in 1982. So you can see further here, if we look at the name Pink Floyd, again, not only the name of the band, but the name of the character in the movie, it does give us that 112 and inverted 211, as we've discussed, written out 3-3, King of America, on and on. You also see Pocahontas, the 33rd Disney movie. But now notice the wall, when we look at that, right? Elephant. Masons, ritual, the blood, again, elephant, an anagram for the plane. And so think about this. The first lyrics in the film are, "It was just before dawn, one miserable morning in black 44. So of course that hail to 44, but that lyric is from the song When the Tigers Broke Free. And that has a simple value of Donald Trump buried alive in 2019. Again, as I discussed in my previous video, that some fucking scumbag siphoned off to make money and totally limited the amount of people who ended up seeing it. But you see how this further connects in. Notice, of course, that number mirrored and added gives us that 888. But so I do want to show you when that lyric is being said. We do have the one eye symbolism as well as the gun. How interesting, 6 chambers. And in that same scene we have him and this lamp. And this really caught my eye because it just reminded me so much of this tilted crescent moon in this Dumbo screenshot that we talked about with the clown and the bong here, again, the Most High. But again, that just really wows me, because essentially right after this, there's one short scene with the kid running across, but then we have a Mickey Mouse watch. And it is intentionally obscured so that you cannot see his hands. But I do want you to see here that it looks like 1026 to me, if I had to take a guess. And I just want you to see how that connects with this Pez theory coding, the Death Tarot card, the federal pillars. Again, all of the things that I've discussed with you regarding those. But I'll give you that one if you don't want to take that. That one I get, because you cannot quite see his hand. But it really does look like it. But so in any case, back to this song here. It is a reference to the Battle of Anzio, which you can look into. It took place in 1944 and lasted 135 days. So there again is that reference to 135, and that will come up at the end of this video. But notice that can also be interpreted as 4 months and 14 days. Now this is very important, because that is at the beginning of the film, and then at the end of the film, this is the very last shot before the credits, we have the number 414. Now, there is a tremendous amount to be said about this. But what I want to first pull out here as we start to look at this coding is 414 is the same as false flag, one eye, snakes, all of this symbolism. But when we look at 414 CWR written out, that's what we can clearly see on this line. It does give us the same coding as President Trump, elephant in the room, the second 9/11. Again, all of these huge pieces that I've been talking to you about, the coagula procedure from Get Out, choosing greatness, the topic of Trump's State of the Union that he gave on the 36th day of the year, on the day that the oldest elephant in captivity died at 88. Are you kidding me? And of course, do remember all of the talks about 36 being or 666 being the 36th triangular number. And again, all of this information on the right side of your screen about that number, very important, that we've discussed. But it's just wild to me. Okay? The United Nations, some geriatric ship, birth age of Aquarius, it's all in there. And what's interesting with elephant in the room popping up here, what I was thinking about was that and marching hammers that we see in the Pink Floyd film. Again, one of the most iconic pieces of it, the Nazi-esque hammers marching. But that coding for marching hammers is the same as pink elephants from Dumbo. And the same as D'Angelo Vickers, the man who says he would gladly get shot in the head in that episode that Michael leaves the office. But those all share that coding that you can see on the right side of your screen here. And how fascinating it all is. But again, let's keep moving. So 414, a clear mirror number. It means we got to add it. It gives us 828. It's Pez theory. I can't even act surprised at this point. Okay, and there you see 828, Donald Trump. All of it. All of the things I talk about for so long now. Years. CWR has a simple value of 44. Kill, magic, the double V, 55, HAARP, all of it. The reference, of course, to Abraham and all of our discussion of Abraham Lincoln, featured in The Office, episode 8 of season 8, Gettysburg. All of the connections. Okay, and how it links us to where we were earlier in this video. But one of the things I wanted to show you in looking at CWR is when I typed it in, what does it stand for? What came up in Google first was Crusade for World Revival. Now, how excellent is that? Now you can see on this website that I'm going to look at here, Acronym Finder, they have 121 other meanings for CWR. And I do want to highlight that number because, again, in that last video, we saw that number 121 come up for false flag floods, Don Trump, a new era of magic and blood sacrifice. Again, remember back to David Blaine's webpage. But then, of course, when we go over here, to CWR, when I look at the list here, I have it down to 40 because these are the verified ones. And of course, drop that 0 and there's our 4. But again, these ideas of water play heavily throughout the abbreviations. But you can also see some interesting stuff here. Cabinet war rooms. Cold War Rearmed, a collaborative project. Kind of what we're doing. You see as well Central War Room. So again, all of these ways of trying to interpret that CWR, but let's round the bend here. The last song playing during the film is Outside the Wall. And so, with that coding here, Skull and Bones, Secret Society, and Love of Destruction. And then down here, New World Order, The Age of Aquarius. Storm is coming across the abyss, all these pieces you'll find out. Adult video news, again, its connections to 222. The adult entertainment industry, all the things I've talked about. It's just... But so take a look here. The initials for Finish the Wall and Outside the Wall both reduced to 625. That's that number I asked you to hold on to at the very beginning. So if we add that number together, we get 13, the death card. And when we look at it as a date, I want to look at it mirrored because it's 5/26, and that's the 146th date of this year. Right back. And you'll notice 219 days remain. Not only connections to Trump assassinated, but all of these other bits. Donald Trump, the wall, on and on. And so in thinking about that, giving you this piece here towards the end that completes the beginning, that album does the same thing. The ending of The Wall is marked by providing the beginning to the sentence that we hear the end of at the beginning of the album. So, isn't this where we came in addressing the cyclical nature of all of this? Of these walls that we build, the symbolic nature that you can take that to be. But take a look at this when we break these down. Isn't this where? So do notice that coding does show the Crescent City. And shouts to Rick Steele because he brought up that days after my Trump Blaine video talking about Disease X, NCIS New Orleans has an episode centering around Disease X, titled X. Now, how bizarre and surreal is that? But not only that, but when you look at the coding for Disease X, it is 504. And 504 is the area code for the Crescent City, which is New Orleans, which is the show it appeared on. And again, that is just a phenomenal level of depth here. And of course, all of that tying back to the Beyonce formation information that I gave you some time ago. But again, that is just supremely interesting to me, how that lines up. Of course, the crescent and its connection to, right, reverence for the moon and its dark energy. But so notice the phrase, "we came in," Skidoo, chapter 23 of Book of Lies, sacrifice, and 18. So you can look at the whole phrase here written out and these ideas of having been warned and encoded subliminal messages. But the reason I really want to point this out is because in the context of this album, it is referred to as the vicious circle. Now, when you look at the coding for the vicious circle, it is the same as national emergency, which we are currently under right now, tear down the wall, Saturn bloodline, U.S. banking collapse, I am the dark phoenix. Again, that reference to what I showed you at the beginning of this video with the dark phoenix flying over the wall in the 88. It's all there. State of emergency, gunshot wound, you name it. The connections to the number 227. And again, how that connects with the full sturgeon moon this year and all of the things I've talked about with that. It's phenomenally mind-blowing. But what I want to hone in on is this Queen of Swords card. And the reason I want to hone in on that card, and again, for those of you thinking about that 504 still, it was the number of Blaine for his inversion here. Of course, 45 when we look at it in the mirror. But I'm sorry, the Queen of Swords, in which we see the woman with a decapitated head in her hand. And of course, how all of this connects to what I showed you with Kathy Griffin. Sorry, I'm having a hell of a time for a second here. All right. So a reference to that card coming up in this vicious circle. But since we talk so much about this number 33, I found a really interesting connection here. In season 3, episode 3 of Ren and Stimpy, yes, Ren and Stimpy, it's called An Abe Divided. If I pulled that up for you on the right side of your screen, you could see it sharing this coding with Sun God, Headshot, again, all these things we've talked about. But in it, the plot revolves around decapitating the Lincoln Memorial and trying to replace the head. So, in just a moment here, I'll get to that. So this is Stimpy at the bottom of the Lincoln statue. You can have him pick his nose for 5 cents. And again, this really struck me because here you have Ralph Wiggum, who I've discussed immensely in his connections to the Pez theory, picking his nose on Abraham Lincoln. And of course, when we look at the phrase, pick a winner, it is the same as Abraham Lincoln, as well as 88, conspiracy, Mount Etna, and Itwell Rife. Remember, that appears on the federal pillars when we first see the appearance of the phrase Reduit Saturnia Regna. We see Itwell Rife appear as the towers go down. And of course, that Latin phrase returned the kingdom of Saturn. But how phenomenal. So in any case, Stimpy, of course, gives us a nice 55. Lincoln proceeds to put his finger up Ren's ass, picks him, and then puts him underneath his chair with all of these corpses. So then, of course, we have Lincoln being decapitated. Of course, from The Simpsons, Jebediah being decapitated. And when the head comes off, on that, Ralph impales his right eye with the ice cream. And again, foundations of Pez theory there. But back to Ren and Stimpy, you can see Lincoln now missing his head. He tries to put Santa Claus, a penny, horns, Statue of Liberty. They finally settle on a city dumpster that they set on fire. So if you look at City Dump, it does have that 666 coding for it. And of course, that is the same value for Formation, High by the Beach, $, Dollar Crash, so many things. But one last thing that I want to bring up here on the way out is the number 414, because I was thinking about it prior to this video and prior to watching The Wall, and I was thinking about the phrase money and magic, which you can see the initial abbreviations to 414. But so in that coding, you do see the reference to Ralph Wiggum, of course, who we're just looking at, as well as Rod Williams from Get Out, who warns us of the second 9/11. Of course, all of these other bits to terrorism and thelemic order. And these written out numbers 168 and 186. So 168 is the same as enough is enough, Vladimir Putin, the Great Cleansing, all of these bits. And 186 is the same as Molotov Cocktail. Again, at the end of Pink Floyd's The Wall, the child is dumping out the Molotov cocktail. And so again, these references to the grassy knoll, the pale horse rider destroying America, on and on. But as I guess as a bonus here for anybody still watching at this point, again, thinking about these connections to the Queen of Swords and the Vicious Circle, all of these decapitations, my banned video on here, again, talking about June 11th, featured Trump winning Celebrity Deathmatch, and at the beginning of that episode, a decapitated head telling us to beware the T. It could be the Aeon, could be Trump, all of these bits. And that's 6/11 again, just to draw it in here. This is the date given when we first see this return to Saturn, Kingdom of Saturn coding. And again, this having to do with the ratification of the U.S. Constitution and how that connects with all the other coding I've shown you. But on the third Saturday, February 16th this year, was World Pangolin Day. It was also the day that Mike Pence spoke at the Munich Security Conference. Now, take a look at this. The conference begins 9 to 11. And just to prove to you I'm not being arbitrary there, you can see the other days, they have it differently scheduled. But that day, it just so happens to be 9/11. And so, this is a really bizarre conference. And it is supported by some very, very powerful organizations. You can see down here, these are the actual sponsors. And again, Lockheed Martin, say no more. On and on. Supposedly a completely neutral foundation to discuss political matters of security, right? So interestingly, in all of this, and especially in connection to the wall, right? Munich was the location of Hitler's main headquarters, or his office. George Soros, also one of the men who's behind this organization. You can easily look into and verify that. But so, very bizarre. But then also on that day, Catholic Church puts out a very prominent figure, aged 88, over accusations of sexually assaulting minors and adults over decades. So you can see that story over here, and Theodore McCarrick, and how his coding does just line up with everything. All right. His initial is TM, 2013. Add them together, it's a 33. And again, in his exploitation of children, me talking about in that pangolin video, because they claim that it is the world's most trafficked mammal, I said no, it's humans. And then on that day, outing a major figure who played into that at the age of 88, also the same value of pangolin. It's a pretty big fucking hit. All right, so that's what I wanted to show you today. You know, I was going to go into, you know, some of these images from the wall and these constant themes in here of just chaos and police going against civilians and beating them. And again, just when we look at this, the Nazi reference, the reverence all throughout this, all of the comparisons to Trump, going all the way back to that tweet that he did with the White House, a bunch of money and troops from the Reich marching. But you see that flame, and then the phoenix appear. Again, all of this incredibly well crafted. These dualistic ideas of water as pure and as chaotic. Okay, this bloodbath notion. The constant references to planes all throughout. The dark phoenix ripping apart society, building its wall. Again, these just iconic shots. And just reel through for you here again. Britain falling apart. All these things you have with Brexit right now. How that lines up with that 3/26 date we discussed. And you can just see it goes on and on. Connections again. The Jewish people in the internment camps and trains. Children processed, turned into meat, disappearing, sold. All of these connections. You know, it was really quite a graphic movie. A child growing up, senselessly killing, blood on the wall. There's that church I was telling you earlier to hold on to, from El Paso, Texas. Just kinda, I know it's not completely similar, but it does remind me of it. Just being ran through there. Again, all these dark pieces, vaccines, the X, disease X. They're constantly presented in threes, the triple X, triple six. And again, just this pointing out of all of these groups and the prosecution of them. And in thinking about the mirror of that we have right now, where instead of groups being singled out and persecuted that would once have been considered minorities, these groups are now shifting the landscape and taking power away from the collective. And so what an interesting shift, and absolutely worth noting. That's paramount. So again, you can just look through all of this. Again, these constant connections to the judge, the moon, atop the wall, the children. Again, this idea of the snake, the scorpion, the phoenix, all connected to the death card. More or less in that order as well. The V that we see on the hair here, again, this representing a phoenix on fire, the golden-haired one, obviously a Trump reference. We also have breaking through the wall here, again, the planes, all of this. All right. So I know it's kind of a reel on at the end there, but there's just so much symbolism that, and I just wanted to go through those. But as always, there's an incredible amount hidden in all of this. I've reiterated a number of dates to you that will likely prove quite interesting as time goes on. And, I really do want to say thank you to everybody who's taken the time to watch these videos and connect all of the dots. There's so many things that I don't reiterate that are constantly referenced or reinforced by pieces that once you really put it all together and start to get a better picture of what I'm seeing all the time, it really is quite beautiful in its way. So again, thank you so very much to everybody for your support, and please be well.